Center. As your technical host, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements to keep in mind. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Click on the name of the file and then click the download button. At the end of today's webinar, there'll be a Q&A session where the presenters will address some of the questions posed during the presentation. Please type your question into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute and help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything into the chat pod at this time. Following today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. This certificate is sent approximately 1 hour OJJDP's online university at www.ojjdpou.org, where you can also view past webinars. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I'm now going to turn it over to Mary Kim Titla to begin today's webinar.
Thank you, and welcome to everyone who is joining our webinar. If you're having any issues with the audio, please type in the box whether the audio sounds good or not. I hope so. We want to just let you all know that this is going to be an exciting webinar. We have two wonderful participants and presenters who are here today. They are both participants in the Unity program. Unity, of course, which stands for United National Indian Tribal Youth. We're very excited to have Jared Massey from the White Mountain Apache Tribe and the Navajo Tribe joining us, as well as Leslie Locklear from the Lumbee Tribe. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves as well, and they can tell you a little bit more about their background. We appreciate everyone joining us today, and so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Locklear. I'm a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina, and I currently live in North Carolina. I'm a doctoral student at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, working on a PhD in Educational Studies and Cultural Foundations. I have been involved with Unity for many years now, and I'm currently serving as the co-facilitator for an umbrella program under Unity, the Today's Native Leaders program. I'm extremely excited to be with you all today, but also to share this information, as I know it's extremely important for Native youth in order to be able to present themselves and represent their message well. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'll turn it over to Jared.
Hey guys, good afternoon. Like Leslie said, my name is Jared Ivans Massey, and I come from the White Mountain Apache Tribe of northeastern Arizona, as well as the Great Navajo Nation from the Four Corners region. And so much like Leslie, I too am a product of the Unity program and what success it has given to Indian country. I've benefited from that. And so I'm also a student studying political science as well as communications at Arizona State University. And so my area of focus that I hope to go into is law. So I'm a little excited, and I should know a lot about speaking, public speaking, but I'm also learning as well along with you guys. So it's an honor to address you all today and to share the tips that have made me, I guess, the speaker that Leslie and I are today. So I'll turn it back over to Leslie.
Sure. So today we're going to really discuss three objectives that Jared and I are going to go through with you. The first one is Public Speaking 101, the quick do's and don'ts, really just some information about how to present yourself in front of an audience and things to prep beforehand for that big moment. The second thing we're going to talk about are some simple tips on organizing your message. And this is a tip that I really wish I would have had when I was younger, about what is the most effective way for me to organize the message that I have to share so that I can get everything across. And the next thing is building a top-notch PowerPoint presentation. Oftentimes we have to share our information using the visual aid of a PowerPoint. So we're going to discuss how to build that PowerPoint presentation in the most effective way. The next thing that we're going to do is we have a poll question for you, and we really want to hear from the audience. And our question is, how many of you have ever given a public presentation? So if you'll take a minute right now to let us know how many of you have given a public presentation.
And it looks like quite a few have given presentations. 92% so far have done a presentation publicly, and only 7% or so have not. So a large percentage of our participants today have given a presentation.
And we're going to jump straight into our first slide. And like I said, our first objective was Public Speaking 101. And before we begin there, I would love to know from the audience the age of some of the youth that we have on the call. So if you'll take maybe the next 30 seconds to drop in the chat your age, just so Jared and I can get an idea of those on the call and their age.
Looks like we have a diverse group this afternoon. This is great. Yeah, thank you all for your responses. This really helps us in giving our presentation so we know the audience. And so later on in our presentation, you find out why we actually ask for your age and the importance of knowing your audience and knowing your age. And so we're just going to dive right in. And so one of the things that I first struggled with when I began speaking in public is these questions that you see here on this slide. And so one of the things that I used to get so nervous about is wondering, where do I stand? And so depending on the setup of the audience or the stage that you'll be speaking from, it's important to know where to stand. And if you are given a cordless mic, it's awesome to move around. Or if you have notes and your presentation is in front of you, then I highly encourage you to stand behind the podium. But if you feel comfortable and confident enough to where you don't need those notes, then I would highly suggest that you move away from the podium and take that the moving mic with you, unless you have a cordless wire that's connected to you, which in most cases that's ideal for giving public presentations, because when you move, you get the direction from the audience, and so they'll follow you.
And so the next thing that you see on our slide here is mic check, can you hear me? I don't know if you all noticed, but I have a very strong accent, and I'm from North Carolina. And when I'm nervous, I really tend to speed up in terms of talking in order to just throw my message out there so that I'm not talking anymore. So one thing that you really want to recognize is make sure that your voice is audible, loud, and clear. So our nerves can oftentimes cause us to speed up in terms of speaking, and if that's you, then maybe you want to begin working with note cards in order to support your presentation, but also slow yourself down. And for me, it really took practice in speaking slowly and clearly. And to be honest, this is often best done just in front of a mirror or simply out loud to yourself. So practicing beforehand to make sure if your voice can be heard, but also if you're slow, slowing your speech down as well. And that is also extremely important to make sure that your message is heard. The next thing that you're going to see is realizing the power of your words. And so, again, a lot of times when you're in front of an audience, the nerves kind of kick in And you really want to kind of be careful about what you say in order to not let those nerves misconstrue your story. So taking time to prepare your story and what you're going to say. But this also brings in something really important that I know a lot of people struggle with, and that's in terms of the ums and the oh yes and the and. So I personally was guilty of a lot of the ums, and I got a tip a long time ago from someone that simply told me anytime I started to say to stop and swallow, which is really weird, but it has really helped in terms of realizing the power of my words and slowing down. And I know that we have in the comments right now, we have some discussions about standing for long periods of time and also limited mobility. So again, just recognizing how you're most comfortable in terms of public speaking and what makes you the most comfortable. I know personally, when I first started public speaking, standing behind a podium, as long as I could have my notes, made me extremely comfortable, and it didn't mean that I had to walk around. I know at times that I've sat on a panel and I've been able to sit in a chair, which also made me, again, feel more comfortable in front of a group of people. But I really think it takes finding that sense of comfort for every single person, which sometimes takes a little bit of practice, but it's definitely an important thing if you have the opportunity to practice ahead of time.
And it's also important to tell the organizers of the event that you're speaking at about mobility and how you would prefer the setup to be, because they will accommodate you based off of that. And so that's very important that you make those arrangements prior to your presentation so that you're well prepared and that you're ready for they're ready for you and you're ready for them.
Yes. And so on this next slide, you're going to see the first thing, as you notice from the meme we have here, we're going to discuss beware of distractions that take away from your message. So a lot of times there are simple things that we don't notice that we do that those in the audience are extremely aware of. And as you can see from the picture here, it is distracting clothing, or it may be fidgeting while you're on stage. There are a lot of things that can take away from your message to the point where your audience is really no longer listening to what you have to say, but they may be paying attention to something you have on. They may be paying more attention to you moving. So you want to be aware of your clothing and the message that clothing is sending. So if there are any large messages or words or photos, you want to stay away from that sort of clothing. Wearing neutral clothing that is pertinent to your message. For example, I've known youth councils who have done presentations wearing their youth council T-shirts, which then supports their message. So again, and Jared is now going to talk a little bit about the idea of what we wear when we want to present.
This is probably one of my greatest, or my favorite subjects to talk about, is presentation and your attire, which we like to call presentation swag. And so one of the things that I learned early on is the way you present yourself is truly a reflection of yourself, your family, and ultimately your people, as you serve as that walking representation of those that raised you. And so in doing so, it's very important that you dress appropriately. And so what I've discovered over the years is that people take you more seriously if you're dressed to impress, but making sure that you pay attention to your audience. And so knowing beforehand what the conference attendees will be like, what the audience will be like, what the environment will be like. Because there are some instances where you would like to, where I would encourage you to dress business casual. Some events will require you to dress in business clothes, fully business clothes. And with keynote presentations, I like to prefer, and I also encourage youth to wear dress-up clothes as well as traditional regalia, although it may be seen as being a distraction. However, you could utilize your clothing to tell your story. And so relating jewelry back to your story, relating the traditional attire that you're wearing to your story. And so that's one thing that I've discovered over the years of speaking, is that when you are dressed traditional, which is one of the main things I always encourage youth to do, is dress traditional and be that walking representation of your people and tell your story through your attire, because ultimately you wouldn't be the person you are without your identity as a Native American, and so portraying that in a positive manner is always imperative. And so making sure you do not, however, wear casual clothes or wear clothing that have words on it, like Leslie had stated earlier. It's a distraction unless that is going along with your presentation, then you can do that. And so I've also learned that it's important that you iron the night before, and especially for youth. If you're a youth on this call, make sure your clothing is laid out and everything's ready for you to go in the morning time, because time will run from you, and taking that extra 10 minutes out of your morning to iron your clothes will really cause a problem with your planning and your schedule. So I highly encourage you all to iron and lay out your clothing the night before, so that when the morning comes, all you have to focus on is your speech and your presentation, and so your whole focus will be on that. And so presentation is key.
Yes, and so the next thing, after you know exactly what you want to wear, now we're going to discuss a little bit more of preparing your message. For me, humor is huge. I'm an extremely funny person. I love to use humor in everything that I do. But over the years, there's one thing that I've learned, and that there's a time and a place, and there is an appropriate form of humor. So there's an appropriate way to engage the audience and make sure that they are enjoying your message, to make sure that they are not only understanding what you're saying, but that they're interested and they're excited about what you want to hear. So humor makes sure it will make your message more engaging. It will make your message more memorable. But you don't want to be that speaker who ends up telling a 10-minute joke and it's actually not funny. So again, making sure you know the line of using appropriate humor. Ensure that the humor is appropriate for your audience as well. I know personally I spend a lot of time talking to Native youth, and so I know a lot of cultural references when it comes to Native youth, whether it's memes, new music, a new video that's been released. So making a point to use those humorous points. However, when I'm standing in front of an audience of elders in my tribal community, I'm not going to talk about the recent Drake video. So there's a difference in the terms of humor and relativity that you want to make. And you also don't want to get too personal with your humor. So again, making sure you use appropriate humor and staying off that line of things got a little uncomfortable for everyone in the audience. You don't want your message to be distorted as opposed to simply engaging the audience. And I was told a long time ago, one tip that I received, if you're on the edge of it, then just veer away from it. Or especially if you are that person who humor is really not your thing, you know, you really don't want to add jokes, that's not a necessity. But for some of us, especially in the traditional community, we tend to use humor as a way to initially engage people. So just being aware that there is a appropriate way to use humor in your message to engage the audience.
And when you're distracted or you go off topic when you're doing a presentation, humor is a good way to segue back into your topic. I know there's just a quick story. When Leslie and I were at the White House Tribal Youth Gathering 2 years ago in Washington, D.C., under the President Obama's administration, we were instructed to sit on panels. And so these panels were with high key officials in our government. And so I was very, very nervous. And so I was sitting on stage. The environment was all chairs. And so these 4 women were on chairs, and I was the only male on stage. And I was very nervous about being the only male on stage. And I kind of lost my train of thought, and it went quiet for about maybe 40 seconds or so. And so I got really nervous, and so the first thing I could think of is turning to humor. And so one way that I was able to, you know, find my place again and to connect the audience with me again was to crack a joke, and so what I said was, I'm distracted by all this beauty on stage that I spaced out and forgot my place in my speech. And so just thinking on your feet in that way, and it was a good way. It got the youth laughing in the audience, and the women were more, more comfortable, I guess, with talking about the topics that we're about to discuss. So just using humor to also go back to your topics.
And the next thing that we're going to talk about, and Jared just kind of touched on it in terms of public speaking, is be you. If that's the type of person you are, I know Jared personally, he thinks quickly on his feet, he's very engaging and very relatable. So everybody in the audience that knew him knew to expect that type of comment, and so that's what made it even funnier. So even though you're nervous, you want to always practice being the best you that you can be throughout your conversation, throughout your presentation. So again, letting your personality show, because everyone loves a genuine and honest message. And this took quite a while for me to learn. I know personally when I went off to college, I thought that there was a way I had to present in which I laid down every bit of who I was, and I spoke only proper English, and I kind of really just set myself aside in order to present my message. And I realized that I was losing connection with my audience, and that my message almost felt as if it was coming across half-heartedly. And that's definitely not what I wanted to happen. So again, I had to learn to, okay, I'm a humorous person. How do I bring in my personality? How do I be myself? So that took definitely a lot of practice, but always remember that that is an extremely part that your audience can feel. So even though you're nervous, they can also feel your passion when you're yourself and you let your personality show.
And that goes into the next important thing, is sharing your personal stories, because you want to be a speaker that connects with the audience. You want your audience to know you. You want them to know your story. And many times that's why you're invited to speak in the first place, is because you have a story to tell. And so there's this quote from Drake that I really love, as Drake's one of my favorite artists. It's, I told my story and I made history. And so it's just a little lyric from simple songs like that can help you. And so when sharing your personal story, remember that there are limits and there are boundaries. When doing so, if you're speaking about success in your story, then sharing those milestones in your life. However, sharing the hardships that you endured, because people want to know that you had a hard time in ways that you were able to overcome those difficult times. And so examples that relate to your content is very important. And one way to also help with your presentations is incorporating traditional stories of your tribe, incorporating life lessons of your people. One thing that I always do when I speak is sharing the importance of the sacred number 4. And when I give presentations, I will only talk about four highlights in my life or 4 challenges in my life. And I tend to find that when you use those traditional teachings, those traditional stories, that people will understand you, because you're using those teachings that have been around for thousands of years. And so relating yourself to those and those ways of life is going to be very important. And I found that that is usually the most successful route to go when giving a presentation, is making a connection with your identity and your culture and incorporating those teachings into your life and how those teachings have made you the person and speaker you are today. And so that also will help you in learning more about your culture, learning more about your stories. And so it's you are benefiting as well as benefiting those around you. And so that's also one of my favorite things to do, is sharing my people with audiences that are not always exposed to Native culture.
And that goes directly into building rapport with your audience, sharing personal stories where they can connect with you and that they can see themselves in you, helps you initially build some rapport and connection with them. I know I've personally been on stage before with an audience that I just could not connect to, and I could almost feel as if my message was very surface level. So I definitely, in my next presentations, had to take some steps to engage with the audience. And that may mean, just like we did with you all, asking them to participate at the beginning. Can I get a show of hands of how many of you have done a public presentation? Can I get a show of hands? Or how many of you has this happened to? So engaging your audience so where it doesn't feel as just a stagnant presentation with you speaking and them listening and there's no engagement. So building that rapport helps them to not only hear your message but also just warm up the environment and really ensure that they are listening to you. This could be something as simple as making eye contact. And I learned a long time ago that sometimes when I'm on stage and people avoid eye contact with me, if I pretend I'm looking right behind their heads or right over their heads, they kind of feel like I'm making eye contact, but I'm not making it as awkward. So again, using that simple trick to pretend to make eye contact can build rapport with your audience. I know for some of us, we enjoy walking around while we speak, and that may mean walking in the audience if it's a smaller audience, placing our hand on someone's shoulder. So those small things can help build rapport. I know that's not always possible with larger audiences, but, you know, really knowing who you're speaking to, how much room you have, what is your mobility, or if you are simply using a cord, mic that has a cord and you're sitting on a stage, just really looking out into the audience and smiling and engaging them, even with eye contact, is extremely important.
And one of the most important things about your presentation is smile, because we all have a beautiful smile. And so it's very important that you share with your audience that you are a friendly person, because I've sat in presentations where the presenter didn't even smile at all. They had a stoic face the entire time. And also remembering that there are cases and environments where you must have a stoic face. However, ending it with a smile, beginning your presentation with a smile is always important, because you want the audience to know that you are sincere. You want the audience to know that you are friendly, both on and off the stage. And so just remembering that how you are off the stage is how you should be on stage, which a lot of us are. As Native people, we smile a lot, I would like to think. So just remembering to smile throughout your presentation.
And so the next step we're going to talk about is organizing your message. And as you see here, the first thing that I want to present to you is the rule of 3. I did not learn this until later on in my academic career, and I really wish I would have known it earlier. So the rule of 3 is really being very cognizant of how many points you put on a PowerPoint slide. I don't know if you've noticed, but me and Jared have kept it to 3 to 4 points per slide, mainly because not only do I want you to listen to me, but also I want you to know that sometimes we can get overburdened. I know personally I've seen presentations before where the entire PowerPoint slide was filled with words, and I spent the entire slide reading what was on the slide as opposed to even listening at all to what the person was speaking about. So again, PowerPoints are not there for us to share all of our information. They're just there to support the message that we are verbally sharing. So we do not want our audience to spend more time reading than they do listening. So remember to keep it simple and direct with the rule of 3. On each slide, no more than 3 points. And you also want to notice that the points are short and sweet. They're not paragraphs that you have to read. So again, they are short, sweet, direct, and to the point. And a lot of times this can be difficult because you want to share something. So this is, of course, different if you're sharing a graph or if you're sharing a quote. But again, when you're putting your message out there, being very cognizant that you organize your message in a way to where it's simple and direct, and the rest of the message you're going to get orally from me as I share it, as opposed to having to read it all on one slide.
Yes, and in organizing your message and presentation, it's also very important, especially in this day of age where we are moving into an era where things are all digital and everything revolves around graphics and media and just progressing. And I know that our audience right now currently on this webinar, a lot of you are in your prime years, I would like to say. And so the presentations that were done in your era are different now, because what was presented then will not be attractive now in most cases. However, the idea of using pictures is always great. And so using pictures to tell your story is very important. I found out that through photos of myself, photos of my family, photos of the topics I'm discussing will catch the attention immediately, because what you're talking about will be accompanied by a photo. And so those photos will tell stories. And right now we're moving into an era of our in our mainstream society where digital storytelling is a trend right now. And so just hopping on that and learning to tell your story in a creative way is very important. However, not bombarding your slides, not bombarding your presentation with so many pictures planned together. And so it's very important that you continue to use media. And I found out that when I share my personal story, I'll use a photo of myself as a child, or I'll use photos of my family as examples of strength. And I'll use photos of just Native youth smiling, because in the mainstream society today, you always see photos of Native Americans on impoverished reservations. You see photos of Native Americans just living a life that is in poverty. However, you never learn about the people behind those photos, or you never learn about people behind the statistics of those photos. And so always providing, great graphics, great photos of Native Americans that are prospering and families that are healthy. And so it's very important that you do so in presenting. And so in organizing your message, one of the important things is your message should include a great introduction. As you heard earlier, Leslie and I introduced ourselves. However, our introductions usually are very lengthy. Not very lengthy. I mean, they're usually more intriguing. And as you all can tell, Leslie has a very attractive accent. And so whenever she gets on stage, you're immediately drawn to that. You're caught onto her accent, that southern accent. And so when I enter the stage, one of the things that I first do when beginning my introduction is, because I am White Mountain Apache first, I will introduce myself first in my Apache language, and then I will introduce myself in the Navajo language, just paying that respect. And finally, I will introduce myself in my second language, which is English. And so many times in our society as Native people, we always have to apologize to our elders, because in a lot of our communities, in a lot of our tribes, it's not appropriate for someone my age or someone younger than an elder to speak before those are elders. It's an insult to speak to elders first. And so just making sure that you apologize before you speak, and just giving that respect where it's due. And so it's important to remember the cultural teachings of the audience or the communities that you'll be speaking in, and when introducing yourself. And so that's a very big part of getting your message across and starting your message, because once you realize that, and once your audience knows that you have that respect there, then they'll have your respect. And so it's important to remember those introductions, and introductions are always key when doing a presentation.
And so the next thing you see, again, we just discussed the rule of 3, and for those, I know some of you said your audio went out, which basically was you want 3 simple points or 3 simple bullets per slide in order to make sure your message is clear and concise, but also that your audience is not spending more time reading as opposed to listening. Here, when you organize your message after your introduction, you want to make sure that you have 3 clear points related to your content topic. So, for example, currently right now, I am writing my dissertation. If I was presenting my dissertation information to an audience using a PowerPoint, I can off the top of my head think of about 15 different topics I could talk about, points I could make related to my topic. However, my audience cannot digest that much information. It's almost overwhelming to think that an audience can kind of take in that much information at a time. So really making sure that you narrow down your points as they're related to your content topic so that it's digestible for your audience. So again, another rule of 3, trying to get to around 3 to 4 clear points that are related to your content topic so that your audience can not only follow your message but also remember your message after your presentation is over.
And when when organizing your message, it's important that you come to a conclusion. The conclusion will bring together everything that you had given in your presentation, everything that you had talked about. It will bring it all together. So it's important to have a conclusion and making your conclusion clear. Whatever topic it is that you're covering, bring it all together at the end. Either that will be by ending with a question, ending with a challenge to your audience, or simply ending with an encouraging word. And so it's important that you have a very clear, put together conclusion.
And the last thing that you want to do that I know oftentimes a lot of people forget is your follow-up steps for the audience. So there's always a reason and a purpose behind your presentation and why you're doing it. For example, I know a lot of youth councils that do presentations in front of tribal council in order to request funds. So my follow-up for the audience would be, okay, I need to touch base to see, is there an application for funds? Do I need to then email my presentation so that they can share it with others? There has to be some next steps so your audience isn't left wondering. I know personally, when I attend a lot of conferences, they have these amazing presentations, and we write down our email address in hopes of receiving the PowerPoint presentation, but the presenter never gets around to emailing it. So their message has kind of been lost in translation because as a person in the audience, I wanted additional access. So remembering that there are follow-ups and there are next steps, and that could be something as simple as sending a thank you email to those in the audience, sending a thank you email to the person that invited you to speak, or if you are asking for something specifically, following up with that ask to see if there are additional steps to take. So I know specifically this is something that I recently learned that I was usually not aware of, that I did not follow. I would show up, kind of do a presentation, say thank you, and I would just leave. So providing your email address so that the audience members can contact you if they have additional questions. I know personally in North Carolina, I did a lot of presentations for elementary school classrooms about the traditional culture of Native Americans and our 8 tribes in North Carolina. And at times, even the students had follow-up questions that the teachers wanted to contact me about. So again, simply providing your email address so that they can contact you is extremely important so that they not only know that you're there, but maybe they'll reach out in the future. The next thing that I want to touch on is the idea of building a top-notch PowerPoint. Now, a lot of people know the ease of using a PowerPoint, but a lot of people can also easily get overwhelmed with all that can be done with a PowerPoint. Again, we see the first thing is another 3. So we have the rule of 3, and now we're going to discuss the 3-second rule. So you do not want your audience to spend more than 3 to 5 seconds reading your PowerPoint presentation. So as you see here, I have 3 very simple points and only took you a few seconds to read them, and then you were tuned right back into my voice and listening to what I had to say about it. So again, you want to kind of follow the rule of 3 again in terms of what you put on the PowerPoint and how long it takes your audience to view it. It's very simple to practice this because what I typically do is after I build a PowerPoint presentation, I would then read through it and literally time myself. Okay, How long did it take me to read that? Is there too much information on this PowerPoint slide? What can I take out? So again, being cognizant of the words and how long it takes your audience to tune back from the message on your PowerPoint to the message in your voice is extremely important. And the next thing that I want to discuss with you, and it probably caught your attention for more than 3 to 5 seconds, is our visual here. So don't overuse visuals. So if you'll notice in Jared and I's presentation, we had various points where we put pictures on some slides didn't have pictures. However, you would have immediately noticed if I put pictures on every single slide and completely overloaded you, especially if they were not at all relevant to my topic or they were very bad examples. So if they are not relevant, they don't really need to be there. As you see, this visual here is a clear bad example of what not to do. You don't want to put distracting visuals that is going to cause your audience to spend more time just staring at it and wondering, what in the world is this picture up here for and how does it relate? So again, you don't want to overuse visuals, but you also don't want to use visuals in a way that does not pertain to your topic at all.
And when building your PowerPoint presentation, it's important that you use font that is readable, because you don't want to use a cursive font. In most cases, when you're speaking before a large audience in a convention center or in a ballroom, it's important that your font can be read all the way from the back of the room, because if it's in a size and if it's in a color that's not legible, then that's going to cause problems for you as well as your audience. And so a lot of times it's important that you keep that font the same. If you will look through the PowerPoint presentation that we had prepared for you, the font is all the same in every slide. And so just keeping with that consistency and that theme is going to be very important. And when I first began speaking, I used to use PowerPoints all the time. And so I would actually match the color of the PowerPoint font with the color shirt I was wearing at the time of that presentation, because I thought, and I made the assumption that that would capture the audience's attention more. However, a lot of times those colors were not legible, and the font often changes depending on the type of computer you use and the type of format you use. And so just remember to pay attention to that.
And so the next thing in terms of building a top-notch PowerPoint, the first thing is be prepared. This really means showing up early in order to ensure that you can upload your presentation, ensure it works correctly. I know even today, Jared and I and Mary Kim were on the call at 5:30 to make sure all of the technology was ready, everything was set and ready to go. You want to save it multiple times. A lot of times if you're traveling to a different place, you want to have it saved on a USB. So, and you also, another thing that I've recently started doing is ensuring that I can access it via email if necessary. So if that means emailing it to myself, emailing it to someone else, just making sure there are multiple ways that I can access this presentation if I get there and there's an issue. And I know in the audience we have an information about Google Slides. I know personally I've used Google Slides. Jared and I actually used Google Slides to create this PowerPoint because it allowed us to work together even though he's in Arizona and I'm in North Carolina. But you also realize that Google Slides are also easy to pull up because you can access them via your email, so they're easy to access. Also, Donna, I love Prezi. For those of you that are on the line and don't know what Prezi is, it's another presentation format that you can access online. I really love Prezi. It's very interactive, but again, it's one of those things that you want to make sure you have your link. So today's world is moving towards everything is digital and you can save it online. So I know personally I don't take a USB anywhere unless I have to, but making sure I can always access things via email and being prepared to access my PowerPoint or my message in multiple ways is extremely important. And sometimes the simplest thing that goes along with that is simply really being early and being prepared to ensure that everything you have is going to go smoothly.
The only problem that I've encountered with Prezi that you all should know is that I've given a lot of presentations on the reservation, and many times the reservation, when I would give presentations there, a lot of them didn't have internet access, or internet connection was a fee to those that were putting on the event. And so just taking note of that you have a backup plan if you do have a Prezi presentation planned, just making sure that you have a backup PowerPoint just in case that Prezi doesn't work. And I love Prezi. I pay attention more actually when I give Prezi presentations, or I'm watching Prezi presentations. If your audience is between those ages, those youth ages of elementary to college, then the Prezi presentation is the route to go. But if your audience is a little older, then maybe a PowerPoint presentation would be best, depending on what it's all about your audience, just knowing your audience. And I've encountered problems when I've prepared a great Prezi presentation, and then I arrive at the convention center, and the convention center didn't have Wi-Fi or internet or connection for me that was made available, so I have to just do my presentation without my slides. So just having a backup plan when doing those Prezi presentations. And like I said, in the beginning, we first asked all of you what your age was because we needed to know our audience. We wanted to know what age range we will be speaking to so that we will cater our presentation to you and that it is catered to everyone within the age range. And so one thing that I've discovered performing, because I'm a hoop dancer for audience and speaking for audience, is that when I speak to elders, my tone changes and the way I interact with them is totally different than how I would interact with youth. And so making sure that you don't use slang words with elders because they're not going to understand, and making sure that when you're speaking to youth that your vocabulary is will be understandable, because from experience, growing up on the reservation, I honestly did not know what probably what presentation meant. I didn't know. I didn't understand a lot of words, and I didn't understand the vocabulary of some of those presenters that would come to my high school because my vocabulary wasn't up to par. And so just being, just remembering the audience and knowing what the level they're at is very important, because I know that when, sex education presentations came to me, when people would speak to me, if I didn't understand the word, I would know that later on I'll have to Google those words. But then again, yes, so it varies from each reservation. So yeah, know your audience.
And the next thing is a very simple one, very straight to the point, is proofread. I know personally for me, my route of proofreading is, number one, have someone else review it, and number two, read every single thing out loud. So when I created this presentation with Jared, I went through every single slide and read it out loud, because that is the easiest way to catch your mistakes, along with backing yourself up. So again, letting someone else review your presentation, but also proofreading your presentation by simply reciting everything out loud. No matter how time-consuming it may be, you'll definitely catch those simple mistakes.
And this is the only presentation I believe Leslie and I have given where we've read directly from our slides, only because this format is different. If we were speaking before all of you in an audience, then we wouldn't be reading off these slides. But because all of you are everywhere across the country, we're reading off those slides. But when giving your presentation, don't read from your slides. Don't let your presentation control you. Don't let your slides direct you. You direct your slides. So remembering not to read directly off your slides, because the audience will then shift its attention from you to the PowerPoint.
And the last thing is, remember, proper preparation prevents poor performance. So you want to practice. So that's a very simple way to remember that. This means if I'm giving a very important presentation, that I need to practice that presentation. I need to stand up, whether it's just in front of a roommate, in front of a friend, in front of a spouse, and I need to practice. So this is a skill that a lot of people either have or don't have, but practicing always helps to refine it. So whether that means understanding, okay, this is where I'm going to stand, this is how I hold the microphone, this is how loud I need to speak, these are the note cards I need. You always want to make sure that you're taking the time to practice no matter how many times you've done it. So I know in the past week that Jared and I have had this presentation, I've been through it multiple times, even though I know very well how to give a presentation and I'm very familiar with PowerPoint. I wanted to make sure that I knew all of the points so that I could portray my message without stumbling on my words. And the next thing that I'm going to show you, I know we're winding down on time, and so we're only going to show you about 3 to 4 minutes. You're going to see a video here of a presenter doing absolutely everything wrong. And so as we are showing the 3-minute video, I'm actually going to ask you all to interact with us a little bit. If you'll type in the chat box all of the things that you see that she is doing wrong, no matter how small they may seem, please make note of them in the chat box. And we are going to really just look at this video for about 3 minutes, and then we'll come back to you all.
We have a very special guest today. We have Dr. Fisher Katz from MIT, who does nanoelectronics research, and she's agreed just to give you guys a little bit of a flavor about her research. So will you please very warmly help me welcome Dr. Lorraine Fisher Katz.
So I'm here to talk to you today about a very important topic that affects all of us. Nanoelectronics research initiatives in the CMOS. Oh, wait. So this is not the right. Sorry, I'm very sorry. This really never happened. So let me. I thought we went. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. This just really never happened. So let me just. All right, here we go. I like the applause. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about nanoelectronics research initiatives beyond the CMOS area, and there are a number of people that we wanted to make sure that we acknowledged here. Thanks. Okay. So we wanted to really give them credit. Thank you. All right, so let's just jump right in. So CMOS is an optimal electronic switching device that's shown by the following equations for minimum energy per bit based on switching time and gate density. So this is basically a reiteration of Landauer's principle, which you should know is any logical irreversible manipulation of information, such as the erasure of a bit or merging of two computational paths, must be accompanied by corresponding entropy increase in non-information bearing degrees of freedom. Yeah? Okay. So you guys with me? Good? Yeah.
Actually, I have a question. Can you please explain what MOSFET stands for?
Are you serious? I'm sorry. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, you probably shouldn't be here. But we can talk about it afterwards. So if anybody has that confusion, we can really talk about that later. But I really don't want to take the time to get into those kind of basics right now, okay? All right, thanks.
So I know you guys saw that there were multiple things in this presentation that absolutely did not go well. So, and honestly, I have had some of these happen. So if you will take the next few seconds to type in the chat what you noticed or what you saw. I see unprepared, reading off her notes. She was very scattered. There was absolutely too much. Even on her introduction slide, there was too much information. The font, she didn't explain simple things. She was very unrelatable and rude. She did not introduce herself. She talked very fast. Perfect. So you guys are noticing all of the things that were so wrong with this presentation. But another thing, if you didn't notice the face of the audience members, they were not engaged in her information at all. And I'm sure after that last comment that they absolutely tuned out. So this actually, I know someone said, was it real? This was actually an example of a bad presentation done to an undergraduate class. So at the end of the 7 minutes, they were told that it was an example of a bad presentation and that she's actually an actress. So it was really funny, not for them in the beginning because they thought they were really getting information, but in the end realized that it was actually an actress. And so now we'll move on. I know we have a few more minutes. Are there any additional questions for Jared and I?
And you can comment on the chat if you have any questions.
Jared and Leslie, this is Mary Kim. Good job. You know, just a couple of things that I've learned as I've given presentations, and a couple of good pointers for me was, you know, looking directly at, into the eyes of people in the audience can make you nervous. So I was challenged to look above their heads and look for exit signs, look around the room, and that might help with making people less nervous. And then just at the very beginning, taking some deep breaths, because I know people, you know, tend to start getting a little anxious as they start to get on stage and in front of a mic. I don't know what you all have done to help with that, but those were just a couple of things that have helped me.
And I know we had some information about font size and colors. I know personally with my presentations, I tend to always stick with black just because it's the safest, as well as you'll see in our presentation, not necessarily a colored or textured background. And I also typically do Times New Roman or Arial. And when we're thinking about size, I really want my 3 points not necessarily to overbear my slide, but also fill it up enough where it's big enough that those in the back can see it as well. So again, keeping that in mind, the audience, as well as can they see it from far away, but not making it too small to where they need to zoom in with their camera lens in order to see it.
And headers is always the route to go. When I give presentations, usually I'll just do one, depending on what I'm speaking about. That will be a header, and that will be it. Just one word on the PowerPoint on that one slide, and I'll talk about that one word. So it's not necessarily having more than one paragraph.
And the last thing that we wanted to share was some different resources. I know college and high schools a lot of times have resource centers where you can get additional information on how to present and best ways to present, as well as career centers have a lot of that information. I know personally, as you saw here, I spend a lot of time on Pinterest and YouTube, and I'm a visual learner, so those visual things really help me practice. And also, even that YouTube video maybe let me see what all of those bad examples look like in real life. So I know Mary Kim and Jared, do you have any additional resources?
One of the things that really helped me in preparing for presentations is I took Toastmasters, which is a program that you take in order to improve your speaking. And because I have a speech impediment, I took speech therapy, so that also helped me with learning how to pronounce words. And so just going back to those exercises helped me. And so if you have those problems, then I would suggest Toastmasters and just learning exercises and how to properly pronounce words. And I see that a question that came up, and it says, how do you let irritation show with rowdy audiences? That's really good. I try not. If it's a classroom, I'll get quiet. I'll stand there and not say anything until they're done, because I'll wait for them. You're not a parent when you're speaking to classrooms, so just wait and have patience and make sure that they recognize that what they're doing is bad, opposed to you telling them. So just being patient and just quiet and waiting for them is what I usually do, and that's help me when I give presentations to elementary school classes.
And we'll turn it back over to Allie to close us out.
Hi, everyone. This webinar is going to be archived on OJJDP's online university in about 3 weeks. And for more information, please contact Mary Kim Tifla and Unity. You can also contact OJJDP or NTTAC via the Help Desk by following the contact information on the slide. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and please have a great evening.